Chee's Daughter by Juanita Platero and Siyowin Miller. The hat told the story, the big, black, drooping Stetson. It was not at the proper angle, the proper rakish angle for so young a Navajo. There was no song, and that was not in keeping either. There should have been at least a humming, a faint, all to himself, hey, 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 yo. For it was a good horse he was riding, a slender-legged, high-stepping buckskin that would race the wind with light knee urging. This was a day for singing, a warm winter day, when the touch of the sun upon the back belied the snow high on distant mountains. Wind, warmed by the sun, touched his high-boned cheeks like flicker feathers, and still he rode on silently, deeper into Little Canyon, until the red rock walls rose straight upward from the stream bed, and only a narrow piece of blue sky hung above. Abruptly the sky widened where the canyon walls were pushed back to make a wide place, as though in ancient times an angry stream had tried to go all ways at once. This was home, this wide place in the canyon, levels of jagged rock and levels of rich red earth. This was home to Chee, the rider of the buckskin, as it had been to many generations before him. He stopped his horse at the stream and sat looking across the narrow ribbon of water to the bare-branched peach trees. He was seeing them each springtime, with their age-gnarled limbs transfigured beneath veils of blossom pink. He was seeing them in autumn laden with their yellow fruit, small and sweet. Then his eyes searched out indistinct furrows of the fields beside the stream, where each year the corn and beans and squash drank thirstily of the overflow from summer rains. Chee was trying to outweigh today's bitter betrayal of hope by gathering to himself these reminders of the integrity of the land. Land did not cheat. His mind lingered deliberately on all the days spent here in the sun caring for the young plants, his songs to the earth and to the life springing from it.
In the middle of the wide field, yellow corn boy, he has started both ways.
Then the harvest and repayment in full measure. Here was the old feeling of wholeness and of oneness with the sun and earth and growing things. Chee urged the buckskin toward the family compound where, secure in a recess of overhanging rock, was his mother's dome-shaped hogan, red rock and red adobe like the ground on which it nestled. Not far from the hogan was the half-circle of brush, like a dark shadow against the canyon wall, corral for sheep and goats. Farther from the hogan, in full circle, stood the horse corral made of heavy cedar branches sternly interlocked. Chee's long, thin lips curved into a smile as he passed his daughter's tiny hogan, squatted like a round Pueblo oven beside the corral. He remembered the summer day when together they sat back on their heels and plastered wet adobe all about the circling walls of rock and the woven dome of pinyon twigs. How his family laughed when the little one herded the bewildered chickens into her tiny hogan as the first snow fell. Then the smile faded from Chee's lips, and his eyes darkened as he tied his horse to a corral post and turned to the strangely empty compound. Someone has told them, he thought, and they are inside weeping. He passed his mother's deserted loom on the south side of the hogan and pulled the rude wooden door toward him, bowing his head, hunching his shoulders to get inside. His mother sat sideways by the center fire, her feet drawn up under her full skirts. Her hands were busy kneading dough in the chipped white basin. With her head down, her voice was muffled when she said, "The meal will soon be ready, son." Chee passed his father sitting against the wall, hat over his eyes as though asleep. He passed his older sister who sat turning mutton ribs on a crude wire grill over the coals, noticed tears dropping on her hands. She cared more for my wife than I realized, he thought. Then, because something must be said sometime, he tossed the black Stetson upon a bulging sack of wool and said, "You have heard then." He could not shut from his mind how confidently he had set the handsome new hat on his head that very morning, slanting the wide brim over one eye. He was going to see his wife, and today he would ask the doctors about bringing her home. Last week she had looked so much better. His sister nodded but did not speak. His mother sniffled and passed her velveteen sleeve beneath her nose. Chee sat down, leaning against the wall. I suppose I was a fool for hoping all the time. I should have expected this. Few of our people get well from the coughing sickness, but she seemed to be getting better. His mother was crying aloud now and blowing her nose noisily on her skirt. His father sat up, speaking gently to her. Chee shifted his position and started a cigarette. His mind turned back to the little one. At least she was too small to understand what had happened. The little one who had been born 3 years before in the sanitarium where his wife was being treated for the coughing sickness. The little one he had brought home to his mother's hogan to be nursed by his sister whose baby was a few months older. As she grew fat-cheeked and sturdy-legged, she followed him about like a shadow. Somehow her baby mind had grasped that of all those at the hogan who cared for her and played with her, he, Chee, belonged most to her. She sat cross-legged at his elbow when he worked silver at the forge. She rode before him in the saddle when he drove the horses to water. Often she lay wakeful on her sheep pelts until he stretched out for the night in the darkened hogan, and she could snuggle warm against him. Chee blew smoke slowly, and some of the sadness left his dark eyes as he said, "It is not as bad as it might be. It is not as though we are left with nothing." Chee's sister arose, sobs catching in her throat, and rushed past him out the doorway. Chee sat upright, a terrible fear possessing him. For a moment his mouth could make no sound. Then, "The little one. Mother, where is she?" His mother turned her stricken face to him.
"Your wife's people came after her this morning. They heard yesterday of their daughter's death through the trader at Red Sands."
Chee started to protest, but his mother shook her head slowly.
"I didn't expect they would want the little one either, but there's nothing you can do. She is a girl child and belongs to her mother's people. It is custom."
Frowning, Chee got to his feet, grinding his cigarette into the dirt floor. Custom? When did my wife's parents begin thinking about custom? Why, the hogan where they live doesn't even face the east. He started toward the door. Perhaps I can overtake them. Perhaps they don't realize how much we want her here with us. I'll ask them to give my daughter back to me. Surely they won't refuse. His mother stopped him gently with her outstretched hand.
"You couldn't overtake them now. They were in the trader's car. Eat and rest and think more about this." "Have you forgotten how things have always been between you and your wife's people?" his father said. That night, Chee's thoughts were troubled. Half-forgotten incidents became disturbingly vivid. But early the next morning he saddled the buckskin and set out for the settlement of Red Sands. Even though his father-in-law, Old Man Fat, might laugh, Chee knew that he must talk to him. There were some things to which Old Man Fat might listen. Chee rode the first part of the 15 miles to Red Sands expectantly. The sight of sandstone buttes near Cottonwood Spring, reddening in the morning sun, brought a song almost to his lips. He twirled his reins in salute to the small boy herding sheep toward many-colored Butterfly Mountain, watching with pleasure the feathers of smoke rising against tree-darkened western mesas from the hogans sheltered there. But as he approached the familiar settlement sprawled in mushroom growth along the highway, he began to feel as though a scene from a bad dream was becoming real. Several cars were parked around the trading store, which was built like two log hogans side by side, with red gas pumps in front and a sign across the tar paper roofs. Red Sands Trading Post. Groceries, gasoline, cold drinks, sandwiches, Indian curios. Back of the trading post, an unpainted frame house and outbuildings squatted on the drab, treeless land. Chee and the little one's mother had lived there when they stayed with his wife's people. That was according to custom, living with one's wife's people. But Chee had never been convinced that it was custom alone which prompted Old Man Fat and his wife to insist that their daughter bring her husband to live at the trading post. Beside the post was a large hogan of logs, with brightly painted pseudo-Navajo designs on the roof, a hogan with smoke-smudged windows and a garish blue door which faced north to the highway. Old Man Fat had offered Chee a hogan like this one. The trader would build it if he and his wife would live there, and Chee would work at his forge, making silver jewelry where tourists could watch him. But Chee had asked instead for a piece of land for a cornfield and help in building a hogan far back from the highway, and a corral for the sheep he had brought to this marriage.